Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're exploring a truly profound reflection by Reverend Dr. T. Kenjitsu Nakagaki. You see, he spent more than 4 decades totally dedicated to teaching, interfaith dialogue, and peace building right here in the US. And recently, he penned this incredible 3-part series titled Quiet Footsteps That Touched America. We're going to unpack his firsthand account of how a practice that was once, frankly, completely foreign to most Americans evolved into this massive cornerstone of our modern culture. It's just a fascinating look at the gradual 40-year journey of mindfulness and Buddhism in America.
To really get a feel for this, I want you to picture the scene. Reverend Dr. Nakagaki is standing in Washington, D.C., and he's watching this group of pilgrims arrive at the end of a massive walk for peace across the United States. As he witnesses this incredibly powerful display of compassion and endurance, he writes, "The entire history of Buddhism in America passed before my eyes like a revolving lantern." I mean, it's such a cinematic image, isn't it? This single, quiet moment triggers this flood of memories for him, a complete retrospective of his life's work since arriving in the country. And to really understand what he saw in that revolving lantern, well, we've got to travel back in time with him. Let's move to and see how this builds in Section 1, Quiet Beginnings in 1985.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer contrast. Let's flash back to 1985. That's the year Reverend Dr. Nakagaki first arrived in America. It is so easy to take our current culture of, yoga studios on every corner and meditation apps on our phones for granted. But the cultural landscape back then, it was drastically different. Ordinary Americans were so unfamiliar with the concept that if you said the word Buddhist, a lot of people actually confused it with Baptist. Seriously. And when people did claim to know the Buddha, they almost always pictured the plump, laughing Buddha rather than the historical figure or his teachings. You literally had to hunt down these niche specialty shops focusing entirely on Asian cultures just to find a single book on the subject. Fast forward to today, and you can walk into literally any mainstream bookstore and find towering shelves dedicated to mindfulness, meditation, compassion, and interdependence. So how on earth did we get here in just a few short decades?
Section 2, A Cultural Awakening.
Well, this transformation certainly wasn't overnight. It was more like a massive cultural awakening, a perfect storm of conditions coming together in the 1990s. We see this wild confluence of pop culture events, publishing milestones, and spiritual leadership that acted as a major catalyst for societal change. We start with his arrival in 1985, a time of near total obscurity. But notice how the sparks really start catching fire around 1993. By 1999, the United Nations is actually holding annual Vesak observances to commemorate the Buddha's birth. And by 2001, we see these traditions offering this profound sense of healing to an incredibly wounded nation. Each step on this timeline represents a massive leap in public awareness.
Let's zoom in on 1993 for a second, because it was truly a watershed year, where 3 major catalysts hit the scene all at once. First, Hollywood gets involved. The film Little Buddha, starring Keanu Reeves, drops, and suddenly it's introducing Buddhist themes to a massive international audience. At the exact same time, His Holiness the Dalai Lama was gaining rapid recognition across America for his teachings on compassion and nonviolence. And finally, you have the establishment of publications like Tricycle magazine, which meant that literature on Zen and Tibetan traditions was finally becoming totally accessible to everyday American readers.
And that brings us to this number right here, 300. Now, it might seem kind of small, but it actually represents a seismic shift. In 1993, Tricycle magazine organized an event called Change Your Mind Day, and they invited Americans to just come experience meditation in New York's Central Park. Reverend Dr. Nakagaki notes that about 300 people showed up. Imagine that scene for a second. Hundreds of individuals bringing their own mats, their own cushions, and just sitting together in the heart of Central Park while teachers guided them in meditation. It was a tangible, highly public display of a practice that had previously been totally hidden away. And you know what? It eventually developed into this massive full-day annual gathering.
Section 3, Healing Through Practice.
As visibility grew throughout the 90s, the turn of the millennium brought an unimaginable tragedy that completely shifted the role of these teachings in America. Buddhism evolved from this kind of foreign concept of curiosity into an active, incredibly vital tool for deep communal healing. Right after the horrific events of September 11, 2001, Reverend Dr. Nakagaki organized a profoundly moving event, a floating lantern ceremony on the Hudson River. This was a traditional, quiet, Eastern memorial practice specifically designed to remember those who lost their lives. But what is so striking about this is how deeply grieving New Yorkers participated in and just fully embraced it. It wasn't seen as some foreign religious ritual, It was welcomed by the local community as this essential space for healing, harmony, and interfaith understanding during one of the absolute darkest times in American history.
And this brilliantly illustrates how the practice began to expand entirely beyond the meditation cushion and out into active social engagement. Over the years, these teachings fueled what became known as engaged Buddhist movements. Practitioners actively began organizing around things like environmental protection, poverty relief, and social justice. They weren't just seeking personal peace anymore. They were actively trying to alleviate suffering in their broader communities. And perhaps most significantly for our modern culture, we start to see the rise of tools specifically geared toward mental health and well-being.
Which brings us to MBSR, or Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction. This approach effectively bridged the gap between a religious practice and universal mental health. By distilling the core practical elements of mindfulness, MBSR introduced these really powerful techniques to a massive segment of the public who, honestly, might never have engaged with a traditional Buddhist community. It literally transformed a spiritual tradition into a universally recognized tool for managing stress and cultivating well-being in our incredibly fast-paced modern world.
Section 4. Your Peaceful Day.
So the crucial point is how this brings us right back to the present day. When Reverend Dr. Nakagaki watched those peace walkers arrive in Washington, D.C., feeling this deep joy that the compassion of countless teachers was finally reaching those who suffer, it wasn't just a reflection on the past. It was a realization about right now. And it's a realization that speaks directly to you and me. This 40-year journey proves that these teachings are not just some Eastern tradition belonging to one specific culture or region. Compassion, wisdom, mindfulness, and peace, those are universal values. They transcend culture, language, race, and religious background. What Reverend Dr. Nakagaki saw in that revolving lantern of memories was humanity gradually moving toward a much, much deeper recognition of our shared human aspiration for peace.
And he leaves us with a highly actionable, incredibly simple practice to actually establish that peace in our own daily lives. He shares this beautiful morning reflection taught by Venerable Bhikkhu Panyakara. It's literally just 5 words. Today is my peaceful day. The author notes that perhaps peace in the entire world begins with this simple determination made by each individual person, one single day at a time. It's a quiet footstep that absolutely any of us can take right now. So, I want to leave you with this question to ponder as we wrap up today's explainer. How will you determine to make today your peaceful day? Whether it's just taking a mindful breath before a stressful meeting, showing a quick moment of compassion to a stranger, or simply remembering how connected we all really are. This history shows us that quiet, intentional practices can genuinely touch and change an entire culture over time. But it all starts with a single determination. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this incredible journey. Take care of yourselves, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.